Quarterback is the hardest position in football. If you make one bad read and throw an interception, the odds of your team winning the game just dropped by 20%. But this 5-step process that I'm about to show you will seriously change how you watch football for the rest of your life. And at the end of this video, I'm gonna break down why the traditional read progression strategy might not be the best way to read a defense. And before we get started, I'm not just a random guy talking ball on the internet. I'm a current D1 football player at the University of Wyoming. I've been here for 4 years. I've played 3 positions. I've learned 3 different playbooks. So I know a thing or two about the X's and O's of the game. So without further ado, let's get into it. There's only so many ways that a defense could try and guard your receivers. You could tell everyone to play man-to-man and just guard whoever's standing across from them. This has its pros and cons, which we'll get to in a second, but for the most part, as long as the defender is better than the wide receiver he's guarding, this is a great defense. But the odds are that you're not going to have shutdown corners all over the field, and there's going to be a mismatch somewhere. So this is why teams started playing zone coverage. The safeties are going to be the eyes into the defense, and how they line up pre-snap usually will dictate what every other defender on the field is doing. With 2 safeties deep, the middle of the field is going to be open. That's where you'll see coverages like cover 2 and cover 4. So in cover 2, each safety will have a deep half of the field, and the corners will stay in the flats underneath. Whereas in cover 4, both safeties and both corners will be back, and now everybody is responsible for one deep fourth of the field. But with only one safety deep, the middle of the field is closed. And this is where we're going to get our cover 1 and our cover 3 concepts. So in cover 1, the defense plays man-to-man underneath, whereas in cover 3, the corners are going to play deep zones, and now the defensive backs are splitting the deep field into 3 areas. So just by watching the safeties, you can already start to piece together what the coverage is likely to be before the ball is even snapped. Now yes, there's ways that the defense can try and play mind tricks on you and rotate the coverage right as the ball is being snapped, and we're going to dive into that later in the video. But for now, just understand that reading the safety structure is critical to figuring out what defense they're actually playing. So how do you beat man coverage? Outside of the wide receiver just being better than the guy who's guarding them and getting open on the route, there's 3 main things that coaches can do to manufacture their receiver getting open in man coverage. And the last one, the defense doesn't have an answer for. The first thing that offenses can do is use double moves to get open. These are going to be routes like your hitch and go, or your slant and whip back out, or even a motion and come back across the field to get open into space. These are defenders' worst nightmare because 9 times out of 10, they're going to play the first break pretty hard. When this defender runs up the field embracing this out route, you can see that this defender has to take an angle to try and beat the receiver to the spot, because as of right now, he's going to the sideline. And then all of a sudden, this receiver sticks his right foot in the ground and knifes up the field, and that makes the defense have no chance. Even if the quarterback doesn't throw it, the defensive back who is guarding you is going to be remembering for the rest of the game, oh, he just tried a double move on me, which will help you to get open on just the normal hitch route later in the game in the 3rd and 4th quarter. And on top of this, if you run a double move on the right down and distance, it is so much more likely to work. So say it's 2nd and 5. The defensive back is going to trigger so hard on this first route because it makes total sense for a coach to call a hitch on 2nd and 5. The second thing that offenses can try and do to get open versus man-to-man coverage is use crossing routes. These routes are really strong because it essentially becomes a race to the opposite side of the field, except for the offense knows where he's going and the defense doesn't really know it's a race. If you've ever heard of a patient DB, this racing element goes against that logic entirely. Remember that defensive backs are taught to be patient and wait until the route declares, so that way they can trigger on the route and make sure that they're going the right direction as opposed to getting faked out by a juke. So 9 times out of 10, what happens on these shallow crossing routes is that the wide receiver gets 2 to 3 steps into his route before the DB realizes that he's committed on this route and has to chase him across the field. So oftentimes, the receiver will have a step on the defensive back. As long as the quarterback hits him in stride, which should be pretty easy given that it's a pretty short throw, that's going to be a hard one for the defense to cover. But what's even more brutal is if we were to run multiple of these routes at the same time. Because now on top of the defensive back having to win this race where he's already a step behind, he's going to also have to avoid his own teammate who is setting a pick for him, and they might even run into each other, springing both guys wide open. And this brings us into the 3rd way to beat man-to-man coverage, and honestly, I'm not sure if there's a way for the defense to stop this one. So imagine that you're a defensive back playing man-to-man coverage in the red zone. What routes do you think you'd have to be ready for? You'd probably have to be ready for the slant, maybe a wheel route, maybe some sort of deep dig over the middle, maybe even a corner route. So just off the bat, that's a lot of things the defense has to be ready for, and that doesn't even account for the crossing route over the middle like we just talked about. So you as the DB line up and get ready to guard every single route on the field. And he stutters his feet and then bolts off to the sideline. So you're covering this, being patient, and then you follow him, only to find out that this outside receiver comes and sets a pick on you, and that creates leverage for this guy to get open into the end zone and catch an easy touchdown. And because this ball got completed behind the line of scrimmage, that's a perfectly legal play. But even if the ball is completed downfield a little bit, you'll often see receivers set the screen and bolt up the field as if they were gonna get the ball, when in reality, all they're doing is just trying to set a pick for their receiver in disguise. These collision and pick routes happen way more often than you might think. So let's say that the offense comes out in this bunch 3-by-1 set where everybody is pretty narrow and close together. They're all gonna run these crossing routes over the field. So on a surface level, this play looks pretty simple, but when you figure out this inside linebacker is going to be responsible for guarding the tailback man to man, the offense is creating a wave of pick routes, setting a wall so that way it's as hard as possible for this guy to get through to the arrow in time. And if he's stuck in here somewhere in the middle of all this trash, it should be really easy for this running back to catch the ball, turn up, and score a touchdown. If the defense gets caught in the wrong play at the wrong time, it's going to be very hard for them to make up for it post-snap. All right, so we just finished 2 of the 5 steps that you need to know how to read every defensive football. But remember that at the end of this video, I'm going to show you the simplest strategy to read defenses. And honestly, it's so simple that I'm surprised it isn't talked about more. Step 3. How to beat zone coverage. Zone coverage is all about guarding space and not matching up on the players. And as an offense, it's our job to make sure that we're stressing out these zones as much as we possibly can. So there's 2 major ways that we can go about doing this. We can either stress them out vertically and have routes hit deep down the field and short at the same time, or we can stress them out sideline to sideline and have routes hitting all across the field. And so by doing this, we are forcing the defense to make a choice of who they're going to have to guard. So let's start out with one of the easiest ones, the high-low smash read. So at the bottom of the screen, we're going to see that Cam Ward has a high-low concept. And all that means is that we're just going to stress out the corner in 2 different spots. So now as this play progresses, you can see that this corner, number 5, is put in a really tough position because he has to choose between either going up the field and guarding this route that's behind him and leaving this guy open, or he could trigger downhill to cover this route and leave this guy open to catch the deeper ball over the top. So the best thing that number 5 can do here is try and stay in the middle so that way the quarterback doesn't know who he's going to guard. So if instead of cover 2, if the defense was playing cover 3 and the corner bailed out to get over the top of the corner route, then Cam Ward would just check down, take the easy flat route, and that's still a 5 to 6 yard completion, which is pretty good on first down. So there's other ways that the offense can stretch the field vertically as well. Say the offense were to run this flood concept where they have a 15-yard out, a go deep down the field, and someone to occupy the flat as well. Which means that unless the defense commits 3 zone defenders over to this right half of the field and just chooses not to guard the left side, somebody's going to be in a bind and have to guard 2 different receivers at the same time. Now, when you're reading the perimeter, it's a little bit easier to decipher what the defense is playing because realistically, the only defenders that are going to guard the sideline is the corner and maybe the safety over the top. But when it comes to throws over the middle, there's so many more options about who could be guarding that area of the field, whether it be a linebacker, a safety, a corner. You could even have a D lineman dropping back and playing zone in the middle. So instead of picking either horizontal or lateral, we got to do both at the same time. So let's consider this 3-by-1 concept right here. We're going to have a Y come all the way across the field on a drag, send the F over the top, and put the Z on another shallow. This is called a levels concept because they're on different levels of the field. But what I want you to notice is the structure that they're making. The offense has created a triangle of routes that's going to stress the field both horizontally and laterally. And you'll see that most zone beaters that are designed for the intermediate area of the field create this same exact triangle pattern and force the defenders to spread out horizontally and laterally at the same time. So what other routes can we run to create this same triangle? What if we were to have a mesh happen between these 2 guys and then send the Y over the ball? Here's our triangle right here. What if we told our Z to run a curl, let him run a flat, and let him sit in the middle? Now you can see we've created another triangle on the perimeter with the threat of being able to come to the middle. And even better would be if we set our T on an exit route and let our X come over the top. Now we've created 2 triangles in the same exact play. As you can see, with most route concepts that exist in football, they're trying to take advantage of horizontal spacing and vertical spacing at the same exact time. Now when it comes to which receivers are running the which parts of the triangle, that's going to fluctuate between each team and each play caller. But this principle of getting guys into each spot is going to remain same regardless of which team you're watching. So we got some ideas that we can use to beat man-to-man, and we also got some ideas that we can use to beat zone. But the biggest problem we're going to have is that we don't know what coverage the defense is going to come out before we call our play. So how are we going to make sure that we have the right routes called at the right time? But hey, if you're liking this video so far, go down below and check out that hype feature. Honestly, I'm not really too sure what it is and how it works, but it's supposed to help smaller creators to reach a bigger audience, so that would mean the world to me if y'all could do that. But let's get back into it. So there's three main ways that the defense can use to try and figure out what defense they're in pre-snap. The first thing they can do is send a receiver in motion across the field. And the defense's reaction to this is going to dictate whether they're playing man or zone defense. They can either bump, spin, or track. Bumping just means that the safety and the linebackers are going to bump across to line up over the next available receiving threat. But when you bump across, this means that a linebacker might be lined up over the top of a wide receiver. This is why most teams only bump motions in zone coverage. Secondly, you could spin the motion and tell whoever's guarding the receiver, you're going to spin up to the post, and the post player is going to go and take him on the other side. And thirdly, the defense can track and just say, if your man motions, you got to go and guard him on the other side. This is one of the biggest indicators for man coverage because teams want to make sure that the best defensive back is guarding the best wide receiver. So if he motions, it doesn't matter. I'd rather have my matchup correct than trying to bump across or spin and having a mismatch. So offenses will oftentimes run a fake motion where they go across and come right back just to try and see what set of rules the defense is using to guard the motion. Because if the corner tracks all the way across, you know it's going to be man-to-man. Most people think that hard counts are just to try and get the defensive line to jump off sides so you can have a free play and take a shot downfield. But in reality, quarterbacks more often than not are trying to use hard counts and fake claps to get the safeties to show what zones they're going to be playing after the ball snapped. So let's look at this picture. We're going to have two high safeties. So pre-snap, it looks like we're going to get a cover 2 zone with him playing this deep right of the field and this safety playing this deep left. But as you can see, they're rotating down into their area to where he's going to play low and he's going to close the middle of the field to play high up in this deep third of the field. So now our corners are bailing out of there to play cover 3 late in the snap. So this would change what deep routes we're able to throw, because if we wanted to throw a post over the middle, it looks like it's going to be there pre-snap because these two safeties are holding right here. But as soon as he closes the middle of the field, the post is no longer a viable option because he's standing in the middle field ready to guard him. From a defensive perspective, you don't want to be so far misaligned that you're not able to do your job anymore. So by giving a fake clap and seeing if the safeties flinch and start to rotate towards their zones, this is going to give you a little clue to be able to see what's going to happen after the play starts. The third and final thing that quarterbacks can do to try and figure out what coverage they're playing pre-snap is to utilize the tempo offense. This is really important because offenses will just boil an entire play down into one word. And the main objective is just to try and get lined up as fast as possible so that way the defense can't get set. The last thing they're worried about is trying to disguise the picture. They're just trying to make sure that they have enough bodies on the receivers in front of them. You're forcing the defensive coordinator to have to call one of his most basic plays just to make sure that the defense can get lined up fast enough to be able to guard the routes. So now we're into step 5. Understanding how read progressions actually work. So there's a couple of different ways that coaches can tell their quarterbacks to read a play. Because as much as I would like to say that quarterbacks can use pre-snap clues to try and figure out what covers the defense is playing before the ball's even snapped, sometimes you're going to have to figure it out after the ball's in your hands. The first way is called the yes-no read progression. So all you have to do is give your favorite receiver a route that you think he could win on if it were to be man-to-man coverage. So when our quarterback gets the ball in his hands, he's going to stare down his receiver on the far left. Did he get a good release? And now he has a step to beat him over the top. If yes, then great. We can take the big throw over the top. And if the answer is no, we can just tell him, okay, reset, and now we'll play the triangle underneath. Another way that you'll see quarterbacks running their read progressions is just to go left to right across the board. But in all honesty, this is pretty similar to what we just talked about. So let's say we put our left side receiver on a 10-yard out, and this is our first read where our eyes should start at the quarterback. If the receiver were to win leverage or if it were to be a super off bailed corner, just take the first read. There's no reason to overcomplicate this. But if that route gets cut off, whether it be because it's a cover 2 corner who's playing underneath, we can just allow the quarterback to reset his vision over 1 degree, and now these receivers are going to be popping up into his vision as he turns his head across the field. And we'll keep one guy on the backside just to make sure that the defense doesn't cheat over too far and we can keep our horizontal spacing. What if I told you that there's a way to read these defenses without having to understand the safety structure? But what if this strategy was so simple that it became intuitive for people to understand how defenses are playing? But what if we just asked ourselves, where's the open grass? Where's the defense not standing? do we have any routes that are headed straight towards a wide open area of the field? Could this simpler approach of just taking what the defense gives you actually work? I mean, there's probably a reason why so many people use progression strategies, because if you can figure out what the defense is running, then yes, it'll be easier to manipulate somebody. But one thing that is always true is that if your receiver can win leverage and then run to open space, the odds of him being covered are pretty slim. Showing one picture and rotating to another as a defense is only a viable option if sometimes you actually play the defense that you lined up and showed. This means that quarterbacks are going to be able to take these throws more often than you might expect. One of the biggest problems that I've found with football is that people make read progressions so much harder than they have to be. Let's consider the RPO, where we have a Y in the block, a Z receiver right here running a glance route, and we'll have some sort of running back coming up the middle here. What this is designed to do is to stress out the linebackers in the middle of the field. So we're going to read his body language and see if he steps up to guard the run play, and if not, he's going to be late to dropping in the zone, and we can throw it over the top. Boom, quarterback just made money and got the bigger completion that he actually wanted before the jump. But the problem with modern read progressions is that it requires everyone to look at the field and identify it the same way. If this will linebacker steps up the field, then we're going to throw it up over the top. It's easy to say that when there's only a couple positions on the field, but there's a Mike right here, there's a nickel safety over here, there's a field safety up top, there's a corner over the top of this guy. And now there's a lot of chaos going on, and especially for young quarterbacks, it's going to be hard for them to learn all of the terminology. By telling them to just read the grass instead and look at this area of the field, and if it's open after you give the RPO fake to pull it and throw the ball, you're saving everyone an extra step. So instead of having a progression of routes and saying, let's look at the yes, no first and go over to our triangle, what if instead we just told the quarterback to look at different areas of the field in different times? So start out on the yes, no, but if that grass is closed, it's okay. This is where our next spot is. And we're just analyzing to see, is the grass open? Is the grass closed? By trying to play the mind games of dissecting what coverage the defense is playing before they actually do it, we run into the problem of thinking about too much, saying, oh, I think there's going to be edge pressure, which means he's going to rotate, which should open up this area of the field, when defensive coordinators are pretty smart too, and they are extremely capable of showing one picture and rotating to another, which will cause a lot of quarterbacks trouble. But by telling them to just read the grass and look in this area first to see if you can take your route, move to the next spot to see if it's there, you boil down football to its simplest form. If a receiver wins leverage on the defender who's guarding him and runs open to space, whether it's man or zone or any coverage under the sun, that receiver will be open. Now, this is just a theory that I have, and I'm not too sure how practical it is, but on paper it seems like pretty genius. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I'm so curious to hear what you guys gotta say. I'm gonna do a deeper dive into this later on, so if you wanna see that, subscribe, and I'll link that video if it's already been posted by the time that you're watching this. All glory to God, and be easy, man. Be good. Watch me hit them folks real quick. Good.